Welcome back to the YAHOWAH vlog. We're here again in our library studio. As you can see, the beautiful painting that my friend Kirk has presented to us is now in a more elevated location. I think we can see it a little better. I love the fact that it encapsulates the old man, the old tree, and the very, very old sea, because all of these things coalesce in the very picture that God is painting here as we listen to Shamuel. That would be the final judge. He was a Shaphat and also a prophet. Speak of a very, very significant and prophetic moment in Dowd's life as the Ark of the Covenant was being brought into the city of Dowd. And if you recall our previous program, the progress of the Ark into Jerusalem was interrupted because there was a man who God then referred to as a woman who reached out to grab the Ark to control it when God had it being drawn into Jerusalem by a Bakar, by a bull. And that bull symbolism is important because it is the sacrifice of a bull that ultimately redeems his people. And it's the same bull who is responsible for ultimately repositioning the Ark of the Covenant on the Temple Mount in anticipation of Dowd's return to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant on Kippurim. He will do so, of course, on Taruwah, which is why Taruwah is such an important part of this. In our previous episode, I correctly deduced that Dowd had originally tried to bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem on Shabuah, and that was interrupted, where Dowd had an opportunity to learn a very valuable lesson that proved exceedingly beneficial to him, and that the Ark of the Covenant stayed for 3 months during that ensuing period with the family of Obed-Edom. Obed-Edom is the same individual that is the bull. I understand that in our last episode, those, I guess, following on YouTube were somewhat amazed that, maybe perplexed is a better word, that there would be so many different references to the various characters that are in God's story, and that that the same people would be referenced by different names, and even during different eras of our history. And this is because of the fact that Yahweh, unlike us, is unrestrained in time. He can take his prophets or anybody of his choosing forward and back in time at any time he would like. And what's important about people is not their physical bodies. So please do not get hung up on that. And God has many, many titles for those who play important roles in his story. Look at Dowd. Dowd is the chosen one. He is the Bakar, the firstborn son. He is the Mashyach, the Messiah. He is the Melech, the king. He is the Ra'ah shepherd. He is the El lamb. He is also the ram. Dowd fills many, many roles, and he has many titles accordingly. He is also called the Shemek, the branch. He is our Yatzah. He is our savior. And just as Dowd has many titles, including one that is particularly profound, which is that he is the greater luminary, as that story is told in Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, Dowd appears again. He is the tree of lives. And if it is confusing to see the people in God's story appear during many epochs, like, for example, in 555 BCE, it's Dowd as Gabriel and Yada as Michael that are the prophets who inform Daniel as to what's going to happen and when and why through the next the final 2,000 years of human history, beginning in 33 CE and going through 2033. So these are individuals that play a role throughout God's story, that were one brought forward in time, one brought back in time to convey this message. It should not be difficult for you to garner this appreciation, because again, souls are akin to energy, and God is enveloping those that he has as part of his covenant family in light. And so they're able to move forward and back in time as God sees fit. And he can choose to envelop them in a physical body at that time or not, depending on what he wishes to do. And those individuals as men, their souls represent men, can be also communicated to us, conveyed to us symbolically as the various things and animals that represent what God is trying to achieve, like Dowd being the lamb of Pesach and Yadah being the bull of Taruwah. Both are also referenced as trees, with Dowd having opened the door to life on Passover. Therefore, he is the tree of lives, and Yadah as the one who brings our attention back to all that Dowd has achieved, providing the knowledge regarding him is the tree of knowledge. And so these things are just interwoven as part of God's overall story. Same cast of characters. God has learned from experience that there are actually very few men who are willing to listen to him and do as he asks. There are fewer even women willing to do so than men, although there are some women, but they are very few and far between. And really, there aren't a lot of men either. Probably 40 is all total in God's story of any significance. And in particular, there are 3 or 4 of them that play the most important roles throughout God's story. And unless you come to and appreciate why it is so difficult for God to find someone willing to listen to him and engage appropriately, that's, I just have to tell you, that's key to the story. It's Yahweh's concern and complaint from the very beginning. Is why he caused the fall of man 6,000 years ago in the garden. God is not happy with the fortitude, the reliability, the educatability of humanity. He finds that most of us aren't willing to listen, aren't willing to act responsibly, aren't willing to learn, are not dependable, and are way too lazy, unwilling to engage and do the work that needs to be done to accomplish his agenda. And therefore, there aren't many of us. And those of us who have shown a willingness to do all of these things, well, we appear a lot in the story. So here we go again. So this says, so Dowd and the entire Bereth Yisrael, the household of those engaging and enduring with God. Yisrael is a name that has a positive and negative connotation. On the negative side, representing what Israel has been virtually from the beginning, and with very few exceptions, is Israel means that those who struggle and fight against, those who wrestle in opposition to the Almighty. On the positive side, particularly when it's associated with Be'eth, which is family, then Israel can be the household of those engaging and enduring with God. And they ascended with the Aron, the ark to behold, being harvested. It was now Obed-Edom, as we know, who was bringing the Ark of the Covenant up the hill that is, past the city of Dowd, all the way up into the Temple Mount on the summit of Mount Moriah. And the Ark, of course, is of Yahweh. This was occurring on Taruw'ah, which speaks of blasting the message of the Herald. And that is important because this again will play out as future history on Taruw'ah. That is when the this observant bull, is going to play the same role as bringing the Ark of the Covenant, such that it is positioned properly for Dowd to anoint when he returns on Yom Kippurim, such that the remnant of Israel is prepared to enter the garden, which will be restored on Sukkah. So, Dowd and the entire Bereth Yisrael ascended with Aaron, the ark, to behold being harvested of Yahweh on Taruw'ah, with the coal voice of the shofar, of the trumpet. The voice of Taruw'ah, if you will, is referred to as a shofar, which is a ram's horn. I have one sitting, I did have one sitting behind me. I don't know what we did with it, but we will locate it again and put it back in its rightful place. It's a beautiful long horn that is makes a marvelous sound when blown, and that it is the call of both Shabuah and of Taruw'ah. And these are the bookends of Dowd's attempts to bring the Ark of the Covenant into the city of Dowd. So mankind's final rendezvous with God, it's going to begin during the first day of Chag Sukkah, which is Taruw'ah. This is because the first day of the fulfillment of the last three Mowed Mikre begins in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033. That is just, 8 years from now. And it is when the entire remaining remnant of Israel will be gathered in Jerusalem in preparation for Dowd's return as king. Well, that's saying something in terms of the entire remaining remnant. 2 out of every 3 Jews are going to die over the next 8 years in the time of Israel's troubles. Of the 5 million that remain, they will be divided into 2 chariots, spiritual chariots, if you will. One will haul away those who are still overtly religious or overtly political, who just don't have the proper attitude or aptitude to be part of this remnant and re-enter the garden. They are not prepared to be purged of their guilt by the observant bull, this soar, this AdamahParah, come Taruw'ah. Then those who are, they were not sufficiently clued in as to Yahweh's name, that Dowd fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, such that they capitalized upon the last series of Mowed. They missed the Shabuah harvest. They missed the Taruw'ah harvest the preceding evening, but that are at least receptive. Those will be determined to have been misled as opposed to be misleading. They're the victims, if you will, of religion and politics as opposed to the perpetrators. All that remain who can be purged of their guilt will be in Jerusalem, courtesy of Yahweh at this time. And so we are witnessing the future history of that play out in these words that have just been shared through the Shaphat judge and Nabi prophet Shamuel. And they're all here in preparation for Dowd's return as king. And as we know, his first order of business will be to anoint the Aaron, the mercy seat, with the bull's blood, sprinkling it on the Kaporeth, on Kaporim. Also reassuring, we have already come to appreciate that Dowd's herald is the coal voice of God. And on this occasion, he is responsible for announcing and cultivating the 2 harvests in which the shofar is blown. We know that he is the Zeroah, the one cultivating the harvest of Shabuah and then of Taruw'ah. Now, if not for the insidious attacks by the mother goddess cult, which has led us to many of these discoveries, so I'm appreciative of that, if nothing else. And they have been hammering away, trying to discredit Dowd's Bashar and Yahweh's coal and undermine the credibility of Yada and YadaYahowah. There would really be no reason for this narrative to appear in Shamuel's accounting of this day. So what follows is all about future history and God acknowledging his support of the key players in his story and his animosity towards those who would discredit God's story, just as the man becoming a woman who was the influencer 3 months ago in this story was killed by Yahweh for infringing upon the narrative that Yahweh was telling, with the bull pulling the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. God is going to do the same thing to those individuals who are interrupting his narrative now. So anyway, it would, as I say, it would otherwise be embarrassing and without purpose for what follows to appear. But God wrote these stories because he wanted us to pay attention to them. I came to this story because of what follows, to demonstrate that because we're returning to the Eden, where clothing was not just optional, it was non-existent, that we should be prepared for the fact that we won't need clothing to cover our guilt going forward into the restoration of the Garden of Eden, because we will be, as Dowd was, very comfortable exposed to Yahweh. And so I was here to hear God's retort to those who would have you dress up to here and be modest and timid and all those kinds of things, because there's been a whole long history of men forcing women to dress in such a way to rule over them, to control them. And he's opposed to it. And so as those women attacked me for suggesting that, yes, since we're returning to Eden, you should be prepared to be exposed to Yahweh. And if you're not, then you're not welcome. Well, they had a conniption fit. So this is God's retort. That's the only reason that the rest of the story would appear as it does, because it's otherwise embarrassing or without purpose. However, in this light, particularly of what we have experienced and considered, and the events and individuals that have appeared in this story, it becomes both prophetic and instructive, even, well, I would say entertaining. You see, a woman who once posed as a member of the covenant family is eerily similar in her rhetoric to Michal. That was Dowd's arrogant and obnoxious wife. Let's listen. As it transpired, as the Aaron ark to behold being harvested of Yahweh arrived and entered the city of Dowd, Michal questions everything. The daughter of Shaul, questionable, peered down from behind the window, and she saw Dowd, the king, nimbly and agilely leaping and joyously dancing, whirling around happily and rhythmically before the very presence of Yahweh. And she despised him, showing contempt for him, thinking so lightly of him that she was inclined to belittle him and rob him of all that pertained to him in her disposition, determination, and emotional inclination. Well, listen to him. 2 Samuel 6:16. I'm looking over at Rich because it's just so perfectly written for exactly what the head of the Mother Goddess cult has done, trying to do exactly the same thing to me, and for the same selfish reason. And she's equally misguided. So I want to read this again because it's just cracked me up that God would be this articulate. Well, obviously we know that God's articulate, but this focused on really bearing, denouncing, repudiating the woman and her cult that have been so harsh towards Dowd's witness. So it reads again. As it transpired, as the Aaron, the ark to behold being harvested of Yahweh, arrived and entered the city of Dowd. Michal questions everything. The daughter of Shaul, questionable, peered down from behind the window, and she saw Dowd, the king, nimbly and agilely, leaping, joyously dancing, whirling around happily and rhythmically before the very presence of Yahweh. And she despised him, showing contempt for him, thinking so lightly of him that she was inclined to belittle and rob that which pertained to him in her disposition, determination, and emotional inclination. I love it when the past foretells the future, and it becomes so specific of something Yahweh wants to teach us today. Well, it was just a year ago that a clinically diagnosed psychopath, who is now the mother goddess of her diabolical cult, that she peered down in contempt, jealously predisposed to despise the increased frequency and insights that were being developed now, particularly that we had finally put Yahweh's entire portrait and plan together from garden to garden. She was miserable because she had been left out of the story. Sidelined and malcontent, she became this same malicious woman. She acted just like Michal, questioning everything. She was determined to belittle and malign. Hers was among the ugliest displays of jealousy ever witnessed. Miserable, because she knew she would never dance before Yah, never feel his embrace. She wrote herself out of the story that she had coveted to be included within, destroying her reputation and her soul in the process. So I am delighted here to see that Dowd and Obed-Edom work so harmoniously at this time. And with regard to the Ark of the Covenant, it suggests that they, of course, will do so again. It foretells that they will do so again, beginning on Taruw'ah in 2033. And because this is the case, then Yahweh will stay in character. He will remain behind the scenes while his beloved son orchestrates a plethora of events pertaining to what will be the greatest show on earth. But he will be there, enjoying every moment of it. They arrived, coming and entering with the Aaron, the ark to behold being harvested of Yahweh. And they set it, presenting it in its proper place and home, within the midst of the Ohel, shining tent, which, for the benefit of the relationship, Dowd had spread out for it. We'll continue the statement in a moment, but before that, I have, as I have shared, received one prophetic vision from Yahweh where immediately upon recognizing from Yeshayah and from Moshe in the Torah that in fulfilling Taruw'ah, that I would become the Parah. And that took me directly to the AdamahParah of Bamidbar, Numbers 19, and the role that that sacrifice plays in restoring Israel's reputation on Taruw'ah as it's presented in Numbers 5. And putting it all together and recognizing that I am being asked to play this role, which is a sacrifice. In fact, it's a gruesome sacrifice. When I told YAHOWAH, okay, it took me a while. I've been at it at that point for 23 years, but I came to recognize that was precisely what God was saying. That he did me the great favor, without even asking, of showing me how it would play out. And this was important to me because I realized it had to take place on the Temple Mount. And I realized that currently on the Temple Mount, you've got two ugly religious scars, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And they obviously have to be purged, removed from that place for God to restore the Oel of the restoring witness, a return of the tabernacle of the restoring witness in its proper place. So I knew those things had to happen, and I knew this sacrifice of the Parah, this productive bull, would take place on Taruw'ah, on the Temple Mount, and that it would be Hasatan, its corporeal manifestation in his last and final act, that would bludgeon me to death. And that then Elia, as he had done 2,888 years previously, when repudiating the religious and political community of Israel, particularly going after those who were prophets to the Lord and to the mother goddess, Asherah, staged and served as a hilarious, sarcastic master of ceremonies for the sacrifice of a bull on that day, with copious amounts of water and YAHOWAH igniting the fire. And so I knew that we would be witnessing the same thing. And that is how Numbers 19 with the AdamahParah and Numbers 5 with the adulterous woman, the religious woman that would be prepared for the return of her groom, who was Dowd, how this would all transpire. But it's one thing to know what's going to happen. It's one thing to actually know that all of those who have been adverse to Israel will be incinerated on Taruw'ah, and that God's going to restore the earth to the conditions of the Garden of Eden, which makes it the greatest show on earth. And it's all in anticipation of Dowd's return with YAHOWAH on Kippurim, so that we return to the garden on Sukkah. That's a lot to process, right? First person to ever understand all of these things, probably any of those things, and to put them all together. And then to perceive how the four chariots maneuver on this day as they're presented in Zechariah, some of which I have just shared with you. But there was still, how is this all going to play out? And the one vision that YAHOWAH provided without me requesting it was exactly how these events will transpire on Taruw'ah, and where and when and how they will take place. So I have seen the repositioning of the Ark of the Covenant. I have seen the restoration of the tent of the restoring witness. I have seen the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan. I've seen this sacrifice. I've seen Elia there orchestrating these events as the master of ceremonies. I've seen the YAHOWAH release the waters from the Temple Mount that will purge. I've seen them intermixed with the ash. I have seen YAHOWAH ignite that fire. And since that time, I have also witnessed all of these things being conveyed through the prophets and in the Torah as well. So what we're hearing about here is really extraordinary. This is future history, and it's rich in its texture and detail. And set up against this is the insider rebellion that had to occur. Had to occur for two reasons. One is everyone, well, actually three reasons. First, everyone who speaks for YAHOWAH endures exactly what happened to me. They have to have an insider rebellion so that they can empathize with YAHOWAH, who has endured it for 6,000 years. The and you don't have empathy for Yahweh, and you can't speak emphatically for him until you've experienced it. So it had to happen. It happened to Yahweh with Abraham, and beginning with Adam and Taruw'ah, and it happened again with Abraham and Sarah, with Hagar and Ishmael. It's happened clearly to the children of Israel. Look at what happened in Yishak's sons, between Esau and Jacob. Look what happened later between Jacob and his wives. Look at all that transpired with Moshe, and how his own sister and his brother turned so hostile to him. Insider rebellions are the norm. And then consider Dowd. This is his first wife, who is repudiating him here, planning to repudiate him, saying that he really was imagining all this, that Yahweh wasn't really with him, that he was writing himself into the story and didn't actually appear as he claimed, and that he didn't belong celebrating with the Ark of the Covenant, and he had no business with Obed-Edom, and he shouldn't be wearing the apparel of the high priest and dancing about like this, repudiating him, saying no, none of this applied to him. He was making it all up, exactly as the adulterous woman now, this belligerent reincarnation, if you will, representation of Michal, has done in the mother goddess cult. So all of those are reasons for it. Another reason for it is that God had a lot to say about it. The prophecies about this insider rebellion at this time are prolific, and God's not about to waste good material. And so he spoke about it for our edification, and it was important that we endure it so that we would turn to these passages and consider them. And when this series is concluded, and I move to the series on the actual coming out party of the mother goddess cult, and you hear what transpired in the garden, you're going to be amazed, and we wouldn't have known it had it not been that we were invited into this material by the horrible behavior of the mother goddesses. So here we are. So we know that the Ark of the Covenant has been, and will be moved under the shining tent of the restoring witness. And we know that this is in direct relationship and for the benefit of Dowd. And then we read that Dowd rose up, and he ascended in the presence of Yahweh for the purpose of reconciliation and fellowship, completely fulfilling what was required to restore the relationship. It was prophetic of what Dowd would do 1,000 years after this event in fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. This is 2 Samuel 6:17. So the proper location for the Aaron is in the midst of the set-apart place on the Temple Mount, and that's where it will return. And when it does, there will be an OL, a shimmering tent, already set up for the occasion. The aforementioned tent of the restoring witnesses going to be erected there, right over the place where the original temple was built and where Solomon dedicated it, speaking of the arrival of the Nakri, who is speaking to you now. It will be erected on Passover, April 18th, 2030, upon the arrival of Yada and Elia. And this means that the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque will be vaporized, and the site will be sanitized. Now, this is a dress rehearsal, obviously, now for what would occur. And now, well, then it was 3,000 years later. Now it's just 8 years from now. Dowd will rise again. He will ascend before the presence of Yahweh on this day of Shalem, of reconciliation. The mercy seat will be anointed, and the relationship with Israel will be restored. Rich's Asher going at her feet. If only Israelites had perceived what they were witnessing on this day, there would not have been so many tragic events to follow. But God's people, like Dowd's wife, had a bad attitude, had a crappy disposition. And so we will do as this suggests. Again, we will play out all of this again, but next time we're going to expect a better result. When Dowd had concluded from elevating and raising that which is uplifting for reconciliation and fellowship, completely fulfilling that which was required to restore the relationship, and he had blessed and commended the people in the name of Yahweh, of the vast array of spiritual messengers, he apportioned among all of the people this entire uproarious and unruly crowd of Yisrael, of individuals who strove against the Almighty, to both men and including women, to each individual, a single and solitary cake of bread, symbolizing what was profane and defiled, baked in an antagonism, along with a single portion of pressed and worthless trashy meat, in addition to one brick of dried and compressed raisins, representing the depressed people. Doesn't sound like a very complimentary menu, does it? But I don't think Dowd was in a wonderful mood towards the end. I think he realized just what he was up against. And surely there would be a revolt. Dowd would have to endure a coup d'etat led by his son. Then all the people walked away, each individual to his house, as opposed to celebrating around Yahweh's home on earth. Shamuel listened to him, 2 Samuel 6:19. Well, mission was partly complete anyway. The ark was properly positioned. The relationship between Dowd and Obed-Edom was firmly established, and the essential message was elaborated. Dowd did his best to instruct his subjects, but they were having none of it. Reconciliation would come, but, well, it would not be for another 3 millennia. So the king went through the motions, and he blessed the people, knowing that this would all work out in the end, even though they were an unruly crowd, especially on this day. Therefore, the parting gifts would match their attitudes. There would be a morsel of bread, indicative of the antagonism the king was experiencing. There would be a single portion of trashy meat, which would suffice to show that they were not yet ready for the ram, the bull, or the goat. Then, to properly assess the situation, a brick of dried grapes would be symbolic of the depressed nature of the people, who are now more inclined to walk away from God's home and therefore to their homes. But the story was not yet complete. Just as there has been another Taruw'ah who became Miriam, there would be another Michal, and they would all be the same. 4 women, 1 demon. So Dowd returned, turning around to bless and commend his household. But Michal, questioning everything, the daughter of Shaul, questionable, came out to meet and call out Dowd. Now understand, these players. Mow'ed, questioning everything, was the daughter of King Shaul, who sought to kill Dowd, who was relentless in his pursuit of Dowd, who Yahweh condemned and sought to end his life such that his head was handed to him literally by the Philistines in a lost battle. And God said that, he had no business with him anymore and no associates with his people. He became demon possessed and estranged from Israel. This is the Shaul who was the father of Mow'ed. So Mow'ed, questioning everything, the daughter of Shaul, questionable, came out to meet and call out Dowd. She said, how is the king of Israel being distinguished and glorified, revealing the significance and honor of his status, the kabed? Remember that word. The significance and honored status this day, such that he revealed and openly displayed himself bare and exposed, stripping and uncovering his body. Oh my! Oh, the people in fancy clothes, those who were still draped in religiosity, would see a man exposed and think, oh, the body is horrible, that this is fornication. Not how God sees it. It's not how they were dressed in Eden, which was a ideal environment. So he said, such that he has revealed and openly displayed himself bare and exposed, stripping and uncovering his body, because he removed his clothing, such that he was revealed today before the eyes of his female servants and maids, these women of a lowly social status, even concubines, his co-workers and other officials, in the manner of one who is of no value, completely delusional and vain, and a moral scum, pursuing reckless fantasies, falsely projecting a worthless impression through invalid claims which have no merit and will never occur, being of no benefit while pretending to be exceptional, who removes and reveals everything, uncovering himself, stripping bare in a public way, in an open display. Oh my! You tell it like it's true, Shamuel. Listen to him, 2 Samuel 6:20. Yeah, all righty. What we have here is essentially word for word the mother goddess cult. This is what they are presenting on their We Hate Craig and we despise everything he claims and that God has said about him, and we want to tear asunder every word of YadaYahowah. This is them. So, Dowd, in returning to bless and commend his household, he found Mow'ed, who was a reincarnation, if you will, here, just a harbinger of what Chawa was like, of what Miriam was like, and of what the founder of the mother goddess cult is like. 4 women. Same disgusting attitude. Same rhetoric. But Mow'ed, questioning everything, the daughter of Shaul, questionable, came out to meet and to call out Dowd, just as the mother goddesses seek to call out Yada. And she said, how has the king of Israel, or his herald, been distinguished or glorified, revealing his significance and honored status, his kabed, this day, such that he has revealed and openly displayed himself bare and exposed, stripping and uncovering his body. I'm not about to do this program and wearing nothing but a smile. That is the essence of what I'm presenting here as part of the YAHOWAH blog. I am exposed. I'm telling you all the various things that God has said about Dowd and about the voice that will restore his dignity. And the more I'm exposed, the more vulnerable I become. Dowd was doing the same thing. He was so comfortable around God, so confident in what God had said of him, and so committed to the role that God had laid before him, that he was comfortable being exposed. I am too. I know that it invites attacks. Dowd endured it. I endured it. But it really is the only way to do this job. Dowd knew it, I know it. And so we have to be exposed. And it said, on this day before the eyes, and she then wanted to demean everyone else, just as the mother goddesses demean everyone who is part of the covenant family. Demean me first of all, most of all, my wife next most of all, and then everyone who is part of the covenant family. Before the eyes of the female servants and maids, these women of a lowly status, every one of these women were scum, the way they behaved, but they looked down their nose at others. When psychopaths have no respect for anyone, not even themselves, and the only way they feel even a modicum of decency is to put everybody else down. And even those that they bring around them, they're just playing with them. They actually despise them. They're using them. They surround themselves with people that are easy to play. If you're one of those who has spoken out for her, you've been played. She despises you. She's using you. She's mocking you and how easy you were to deploy for her purposes. So these female servants and maids, these women of lowly status, even concubines, it's important to remember that she spoke of the concubines. That will come back to bite her. His co-workers and other officials, as the mother goddesses, are constantly repudiating and demeaning those who work with me. In the manner of one who is of no value is what they constantly say. Completely delusional is what they write. Vain is what they claim. And a moral scum is what they post. Pursuing reckless fantasies. That's what they would have those who they lure in believe. Falsely projecting worthless impressions through invalid claims. These are the mother goddesses. I would assume that Makal actually said these words. But she said them in a prophetic manner of what Dowd's herald would endure, because it is Dowd's herald who is responsible for reestablishing everything that Dowd represents. Rather than tearing him down and saying that he is delusional, that he is not a person that God has called out to say he's the central player in this story. Very Son of God, the chosen one, the Messiah, the returning King, our Savior, the Passover Lamb, the one who will anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant when he returns in Gibowr. So she was claiming this of Dowd just as today's Makal says the same things of me and the roles that Yahweh has designated for me. It is verbatim. If I heard this and I was part of that cult, I would leave immediately. This is now about the 10th time that they've called something to our attention and made false claims, that when we turn to the proof text that God is committed otherwise, it destroys them. And it destroys them in such a way it is impossible to rationally deny that this is an argument against them. Yes, she claimed that Dowd was falsely projecting a worthless impression through invalid claims, which would have no merit and never occur, that he was of no benefit while pretending to be exceptional. It's exactly what I hear. It's exactly what they post. Who removes and reveals everything, uncovering himself, stripping bare in a public way and open display, because being exposed to God, being comfortable, being exposed in his presence is the ultimate sign of confidence, that you know exactly what God is asking of you and you're willing to do it. And you know the end result. Well, Dowd tried to be supportive, as did I. But there is no pleasing the embittered and antagonistic, particularly women of that disposition. In my case, I had done more to support and protect the woman who turned so viciously against me, doing more so than anyone had ever done in her life. It was the most ruthless and diabolical example of a beneficiary of great kindness than masquerading as a victim, as I have ever witnessed. She went from profuse praise and unrelenting slander, literally in the blink of an eye, entering an enduring psychotic episode. In Dowd's case, reflecting my own, Michal began by pretending that she was better than him. She mocked God's chosen. She openly questioned his status and the appropriateness of his actions. But there was no merit to her argument. There were, by this time, many hundreds of affirmations from Yahweh that he had chosen to work with and through Dowd. They began in the Torah 4,000 years earlier. And even though there was no one on earth who met the criterion that Dowd fulfilled, and that Yahweh had personally articulated to verify his decision, and through their work together spoke so powerfully about all of these things being true, Michal still disavowed Dowd's status. She was all about dishonoring him. So, what was the point of this? If not to infer that she was more qualified to rule than God's chosen. As had been the case with Miriam and her attack on Moshe's wife to discredit him, and for the same purpose, claiming that she would speak for God, we have another woman in the inner circle going rogue in the rudest of ways. And particularly revealing in this situation, Michal was crude in her depictions, while blaming Dowd for being immodest in his actions. That is to say, she was a complete hypocrite. Dowd wasn't actually nude. No, he was wearing the ephod, the priestly breastplate, but perhaps nothing else. And this brings us back to the garden when Adam and Chawah were comfortable being naked around Yahweh until, well, Chawah decided with a little knowledge that she could be a mother goddess. It was then, only after they were in conflict with God's instructions, that the original occupants of the garden needed to cover their embarrassment. Therefore, the moral of the story, then and now, is that when we're right with God, we're comfortable being completely exposed to him. as was Dowd, as am I. It is also telling that in the week prior to my initial translation of 2 Samuel 6, that several members of the Mother Goddess cult, devoted to demeaning me and annulling YadaYahowah, perpetuated, I should say, their most recent attack using this exact same tactic, literally word for word. Their preference was for men and women to be covered and modest at a time when I was affirming that Yahweh is to bring a remnant of his people back to the garden where nudity was expressly accepted appropriately. But yet they wanted to disavow what God had condoned. Their approach, however, was anything but modest because they went for the jugular. Yeah, they did. They tried to rape my reputation, my wife's dignity, and then they assailed my best friend, lying about all of us. Therefore, let's be clear. When Adam and Chawah were on the same page with Yahweh, they were comfortable being completely exposed to him. When they stopped listening and twisted God's instructions to become gods and goddesses themselves, they became uncomfortable with their nakedness and they ran away from Yahweh. The place where they hid, by the way, was in the midst of the tree of knowledge. They continued to devour its fruit as if that was going to make a difference for them. Then they lied to themselves and they lied to God. Rather than comfort them or accommodate them, Yahweh then excoriated them. Then he exiled them. We'll go through that story in great detail in future programs. Furthermore, this cannot be dismissed as an unrelated story from long ago. It is not only the same scenario and identical rhetoric. We are, in fact, returning to Eden. So let's compare circumstances. Yahweh created Adam to engage in a relationship with him and to work with him. Dowd is the exemplar of this role. Yahweh created Chawah for Adam, not himself, so Michal should have been supporting her man, the king, not antagonizing him, just as should be the case with the women who formed this mother goddess cult. There is no indication that Yahweh and Chawah engaged in discussion, just as there isn't for this cult either, or had a relationship prior to God judging her. This is similar to the story of Miriam, Moshe's sister, claiming that she too spoke for Yahweh, only to have Yahweh deny the claim and hold Miriam in contempt. God made the point that Moshe was not only uniquely responsive to him, but that when he chooses to engage through an individual like Moshe, they know it. So do we. And that is the point here with Dowd and with myself, with a few thousand years between us, but nonetheless, this story is identical. All evidence was to the contrary of what Chawah, Miriam, Michal, and the mother goddess have protested. Adam's name means man in red, as in blood. Chawah's name means to announce one's intent and to speak out. Miriam is embittered and rebellious. Michal is one who questions everything. Dowd is beloved. Obed-Edom represents the bloody red man of the earth who serves to reconcile the fractured family through his work. So these names speak for themselves. Satan enticed Taruw'ah, not Adam, ostensibly because, having observed her, he knew that she coveted both being wise and like God, which would have made her a goddess. He also realized that she wasn't rational and was easily confused. After all, her name tells us that she had made her failing and her feelings known in this regard. Further, the adversary, being clever, recognized by having witnessed her prior to this and noticing her behavior that she was willing to twist God's testimony to suit her agenda. So it wasn't the least bit surprising that she did this very thing. And to a significant extent, she took the bait. She ran with it. She leaped at the opportunity to be considered smart when she wasn't, and to be the first to insinuate that she was a mother goddess. Then, with only a modicum of knowledge, Taruw'ah immediately lured Adam into her plot by handing him the very fruit Yahweh had warned him about. Rather than helping the man she was conceived specifically to assist, she condemned him to die. And immediately upon doing so, two things changed. They were no longer comfortable being exposed to each other or being seen naked before God. Dowd was the opposite of this. While the mother goddess cult, twisting Yahweh's testimony to speak over me, is insisting that everyone must cover up. When God asked the man, "Where are you?" Adam answered, "I heard the sound of your voice in the garden, and I was intimidated and concerned, even distressed, because my nakedness was exposed by the subtle and crafty counsel, so I hid." That's Bereshit 3:10. So Yahweh asked, "Who told you so? Who reported this to you, that you've become naked and were now exposed as a result of this shrewd advice?" But since there was no answer to that question, and since no one has contemplated the reasons it was asked or applied the intent to all of this until this very moment, it was posed prophetically. I will share with you why in future programs expressly for our benefit. Now, since God said nothing about nakedness other than to approve being comfortable, completely exposed to him, who other than Satan's religious minions told the mother goddess and her cult that men and women should be sexless and concealed? From that point, God asked two questions, and both questions were answered with lies. Both the man and the woman shirked responsibility. This is similar to what the mother goddess cult is doing now when confronted by prophetic texts like these, exposing and condemning them, claiming that they don't apply to them, but they do. And God demands accountability. He did not debate with Satan. He didn't have an argument with Adam or Taruw'ah. He did not seek to make any accommodation for them. God was not forgiving then. He was instead judgmental. He immediately rebuked them, setting an example for us to follow. Yahweh estranged them. He not only sent them out of the Gan, protected and sheltered enclosure, he precluded their return. It is only now, just 8 years shy of 6,000 years later, that Yahweh is facilitating our return to Gan Eden, the garden of great joy, through his collaboration with Obed-Edom and Dowd. during Chag Sukkah in year 6000 Yah. And based upon his explanations of what transpired with Taruwah, Miriam, Makal, and now the mother goddess, we can be assured that they will be excluded. They all wrote themselves out of God's story. Now, beyond the Eden comparison with Makal's overt animosity towards uninhibited expression, even sexual emancipation, then we see her coveting the status of the one actually chosen by God. She was so envious of what God had said of him. She used kabed to say that Dowd has done something, or done actually nothing, it was her claim, to distinguish himself. And yet, God had written more about Dowd, and Dowd had written more about Yahweh than anyone else. Well, at least up to the point of his Herald on the 25,000 pages of YadaYahowah. Nevertheless, to Makal, nothing Yahweh had said about Dowd mattered, nor did their extensive collaboration up to this point. Only that he was acting in a manner that she disapproved on this day. And that is precisely what happened with me in the vitriol of the Mother Goddess cult. Adding to the similarities, Makal belittled those who knew and appreciated Dowd as a man of head and heart. She even inferred that the man they had come to know was of no value to them, and that the Messiah was delusional. She called him immoral, reckless, and vain. She said that God's pronouncements regarding him were null and void, of no value or benefit, and that Yahweh's chosen was only pretending to be exceptional. In this naysayer's mind, Dowd's accolades and accomplishments were meaningless. Of course, this has all been conveyed to us because it reflects the Mother Goddess cult's methodology and pronouncements regarding what Yahweh has had to say about our relationship. And to such an extent, it's clear that this narrative was intended to be prophetic. God wanted us to know that he knew that this revolt would occur, that he foresaw who would start it, that he recognized the ploy, that he was opposed to them, and that we could rely on him to deal with them. So indeed, like my king, I've revealed everything. I've shared everything I know, opening myself up to criticism from some and appreciation for others. We are equally comfortable being exposed in Yahweh's presence and joyful in our expression of the benefits of the relationship. In my case, Yahweh was so supportive of our work together, he sent the perfect woman to help me achieve what he wanted accomplished. And in the most delightful, supportive, and loving way, I received what Taruwah was designed to be, but was not. Our king's retort to the condescending and obnoxious twit of a wife was epic. So Dowd, the beloved, said, to Makal questions everything before the very presence of Yahweh, to reveal the proper path to the benefits of the relationship. Asher, he chose to be with me, selecting, preferring, and desiring to be associated with me instead of and rather than your father, and to the exclusion of his entire family. to demonstrably appoint, instruct, and direct, issuing an authorized decree that will endure. Associated with me and accompanying me is a worthy leader who will govern in an official status as my sovereign prince over and among Yahweh's family and his people, over and among Yisrael, those engaging in a enduring relationship with God. Therefore, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to be entertained and amused, grinning and laughing while performing before the appearance and the presence of Yahweh. Dowd spoke in Yahweh's presence because with Yahweh's Ruach spirit upon him, they were always together. Their relationship, this relationship with father and son, was exemplary. And it was largely because all of the people who have ever lived, no one compared to Dowd, the chosen one. God preferred him over all others, which means we should emulate him and not belittle him. Learn from him rather than criticize him. Shaul's was the people choice. Dowd was Yahweh's selection. If you want to be with Yahweh, don't besmirch his son or negate what father and son have accomplished together. Further, Yahweh not only appointed Dowd to be his Messiah, king, son, prophet, and our Savior, he instructed him, he directed him. This is God's approach with all of his co-workers. And speaking of associates, Dowd had learned a valuable lesson. This Taruw'ah, this very day, which would apply to another Taruw'ah. The king would never, ever have to work alone. He would have a Nagad, a prince, now known as Obed-Edom. They would govern together, lessening the burden while increasing the enjoyment. And Dowd's Nagad would have a similar attitude and common attributes such that they would make beautiful music together, even if the lesser luminary was a bit tone deaf and rhythm impaired. So Dowd would celebrate on the occasion. The Ark of the Covenant would be ready and waiting for him upon his return. Yahweh had everything arranged. But since Dowd was a prophet, he knew that things would get worse before they got better. The most popular religion in human history would renounce and rob him. His own people would treat him worse than his wife. In fact, it wouldn't be until the arrival of his herald, Obed-Edom, that he would regain his standing with his people. So he said, I will recede. I will grow smaller, being disdained and despised as vile, trivialized and held in contempt. And yet all the while, as a restoring witness from this, I am humiliated and lowly, a shameful and diminished status in this particular perspective of me. Samuel 2:6-22. Well, this is what occurred. And at an unprecedented scale, never has a man been so important or accomplished as much as Dowd. And never has a man been robbed and trashed as thoroughly. He was despised, he was trivialized by Peter and Paul to create the myth of Christianity, then counterfeited to create the myth of Jesus. All the while, rabbis stood idly by, never defending him. And worse, they replaced him with a crude warlord named Bakar. Over the course of 2,000 years, From the day Dowd fulfilled Pesach Matzah and Bakurim as promised, he was disparaged rather than revered. This would only change as a result of the reappearance of Obed-Edom, who would serve as that final restoring witness. And so now we have finally come to the punchline in this story. Shows you that God's got a sense of humor, as does the king. However, in the company of and all together with the female servants and maids, these women of supposedly lowly social status, even concubines, of whom by comparison to yourself you have spoken, with them I am distinguished, physically stout, quite honorable and glorious. Kapad. I am weighty, even heavy, and absolutely respected and dignified. Shaul listened to him. 2 Samuel 6:22. It may have been the greatest retort of all time. Take that, mother goddesses. As with the king, so with his herald. Oh, well, after a good laugh, Yahweh said, nicely played, son. I'm proud of you. Or something similar. The text simply reads, so regarding Bakar questions everything. The daughter of Shaul, questionable. There would not be for her a child as a witness to all of this until the day of her death by plague. And so ends Samuel. Listen to him, 2 Samuel chapter 6. And on that note, I bid you good evening. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening to this edition of Gibowr on the YAHOWAH blog.